Hello, welcome everybody to another Talking Talent. Today we're gonna talk about how to communicate effective employer branding during COVID-19. A topic that must interest a lot of you and that touch a lot of you in your work today. Before we dive into the topic, I would love to introduce Talking Talent. Some of you might be familiar with the format and some of you also might be familiar with the remote webinars that we're currently holding. But definitely also a lot of people might be new to Talking Talent. So this format is a format of an event where we invite speakers on the virtual stage to share their insights on topics related to the future of work. Today we kick off with a panel focusing on the learnings that the current COVID-19 crisis is bringing to employer branding and how to still communicate effectively. And then we follow with a Q&A open to everybody from the audience. So please post your questions on the right side of this webinar in the question box, and then upload any questions that you might find interesting as well. Before I kick off also on the questions, I would love to introduce Accelerate, the company behind Talking Talent. So a recruitment startup that offers embedded recruiting services for startups in London, Berlin, and Paris. In our model, our in-house model, our talent partners come on site to become part of your team. But we also offer executive recruitment and also employer branding as well. So if you're actually looking for any recruiting support or employer branding support or executive recruiting support, please reach out to me afterwards as well. And then I want to just dive right in and actually let the speakers speak and introduce themselves with a few lines on their role and what they're doing here, and then we'll go over the questions that are stated also in the description. So good luck, and Diana, please kick off.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi everyone. I do it quickly because I hate to introduce myself. So yeah, I'm Diana, and I'm working as employee branding and event specialist now in Polish software house in TenCloud. I've been working from 5 years, and I have always been associated with IT sector. I'm very pleased to be with you today, and we can talk with our employee branding staffs during this situation during the COVID pandemic. So I hope you have some good question and good time with us. Thank you.
Oh, great. Mertkan, please.
I can go next. I'm Mertcan. I'm originally from Istanbul, moved to Berlin 6 years ago, living in Berlin now, and in the last 1 year working at Blinkist right now. I'm working there as a talent acquisition, but mainly responsible for employer branding and also inclusion, diversity, and belonging project. And that's me. Thanks.
I'm Nate. You pronounce my last name Guja, if anybody's wondering. Gets butchered a lot. I lead brand marketing at Job Portraits. Job Portraits is a pretty unique content studio. We're based in California in the Bay Area, pretty embedded in the tech market there. And we just happen to be a creative studio that specializes in employer branding, specifically to create content that attracts very competitive talent in hot tech hubs across the US and a little bit international.
Amazing. I'm the last one here in the round. Hi, I'm Marianne. I'm working as an employer branding freelancer, previously worked at Rocket Internet, Project A, and TechStix, mainly doing employer branding and employee engagement. And happy to be here.
Cool, welcome all of you. I'm really excited to dive into the topic of employer branding during COVID-19, but I spoke to a few of the attendees that are currently present here, and they also really wanted to have some tips on how do you set up your employer branding, like where do you start, and what you do without having a budget. So we'll end with that, but first tackle the topic of the webinar. So I want to move to the first question. How do you communicate your brand values and mission to all stakeholders that are involved with employer branding during this COVID-19 time?
What's that?
Should I go? I can go. At Blinkist, I'm always the one who starts like the meeting, kicking it off.
Nice.
Because everyone waits for like 5 minutes. And then, well, first of all, like COVID-19, like what is this? Like it's horrible. I'm also a little bit. I feel very grateful, to be very honest, like that I can stay at home and still work. And I think not everyone has that privilege. And I think this thing created a lot of instability in businesses, but also in employees. The people are like thinking, like, am I going to lose my job? And this also has a huge impact on the performance. So I think the way that we currently communicate our brand values and mission during this time is like really use it as like a term to create stability, to make sure that people still feel that normal. We have to work normal. So for us, at Blinkist, it was very key for us to make sure that we are working as normal, and also to show internally, like we lost contact from our colleagues, right? We only use Slack, we only use email. So we also thought, okay, this could be also a good chance to create content that we can share our own lives to outside world, but also in that way, our own employees can also see what our colleagues are doing in their remote work. Some of our colleagues are living in France, some of them in the Netherlands, some of them in the UK, some of them in Brazil, and you don't get to see what's actually happening if you're not in the office. So I think the way that we really shift the reach to our stakeholders was, we're okay, everything is fine, business as usual. By the way, I'm also healthy at my place. So this was, I think, our focus and how we try to communicate these concepts.
Okay, nice. And also in our previous talk, you stated that you find it harder to collect this content, right? Because you're also not physically in the office. So how do you overcome that?
Well, you push yourself, right? I mean, the way that you also have to communicate to your employees is, I need this content because we need to show the stability, because it's also related to the product. We also want to make sure that the product is stable as well. Because once the people out there, if they see a strong product, they're going to also relate to a strong employer. So, and I think our team, I was very lucky. Everyone was like, yes, we want to support this. We want to support this stability. So they were like very open to my new concepts that I've developed in the last couple of weeks to make sure that we have regular content, because our content is also very much focused on what's happening in the office. That's how to work for Blinkist at the Blinkist office. And now we're changing it to how it is like to work for Blinkist in a remote setting.
Cool. You want anything to add there, Nate?
Yeah, sure. Happy to go. I loved all those points. I think, through like the lens that I see employer branding through is through startups. It's scrappy teams who are moving really fast. And then now this time hit and things shift. The great thing about startups is startups are extremely adaptable. And they can adjust quickly. And so if anything, startups are very accustomed to change. This is just a brand new change. And I think like for startups, employer branding has always sat so close to talent acquisition. It's very much like a recruiting function. It is there to create awareness in the market and drive qualified candidates to your company, right? But I think like the unsung hero of employer branding that gets often overlooked, especially at the startup stage, is the culture building and connection aspect that it actually generates. And I think like that's the beauty of creating content that tells very human stories and that can communicate both externally and internally to both of those markets. And I think employer brand leaders now are sitting in a wonderful position to be true culture builders, which they actually are. But a lot of times they can get grouped in to a recruiting function because that's like their primary motivation, I guess, from the organization. And so in a lot of the conversations I'm having right now, the ability or the opportunity to create very human content that tells the stories of like, how are you doing things? How are you managing the situation, especially at like the founder level? Those types of processes and initiatives alone have a way of like uniting people and proving out value around something that sometimes can be kind of fuzzy. I think everybody would agree that like sometimes employer branding can just be this fuzzy topic that like a lot of people outside of the function don't know what it actually is and the value that it brings. And I think like now employer branding is becoming more of a predominant function because people matter more than ever. and the visibility that the outside world now has into how companies treat their people is like at the forefront of their mind. It's not just like, what does this company do? It's how do they treat their people? And employer branding leads the communication efforts behind how a company treats their people, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Marianne, did you see that in your previous experiences as well?
Yeah, I think I really agree with Merchan. So to create really like this stability, because I think during such a situation, you know, you're like in a crisis, you don't know what will happen. You're probably sitting at home with children, with your husband, or with your girlfriend, or whatever. So there's so much lack of stability already in your private life that you somehow need, you know, like an anchor or somewhere which is creating basically stability. So I'm absolutely on Merchan's side that you need to create the stability. And actually, you know, I would love to see like company initiatives which really show like care for the employees. I mean, there are so many opportunities of doing or offering, like, for example, therapy via video or doctor visits via video. I saw previously that one, I think, Project A venture, which is called Crew, are offering like video chats with doctors, and some companies are offering this already to their employees. So I think on the one hand, I would create a stability, but I think on the other hand, right now, there's also a great situation for change, or to see it more as a challenge. So probably, you know, you can develop like stories together with your employees and showcase how they actually live up their values in their everyday life at home or in their private, you know, settings, and not only in the office or within the company. Or I think, which would also be a great initiative, actually, how, you know, does the employer brand or the values, or probably not the mission, so more these two will change after Corona, when probably, like, you know, companies are more open-minded for a remote setup. So I think it's both, like, you know, creating the stability part, but also seeing it as a challenge or as a change opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And Diana, how's that at TechStart then?
Actually, in my opinion, talking about the development and success of the employees will be not the best idea. I think we need to show that company is not ignoring this situation and what's happened today, because we need to be emphatically, we need to communicate with our employees and our customer in easy, open way, and we need to know, we need to show us we are together. We know what's happened. We thinking about our future, about companies, about future, about employees, and we need to think about the basic what our values are building are together. Yeah, not like now it's not like development and something like that. We focus on the stability and support, and this is the most important values to communicate with our employees and our customer. And for sure, we need to be empathetically with this situation. We know what is happened, but we are strong. We must be reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is almost a philosophical question, maybe, but where does employer branding begin and where does it end, right? Because if you want to grasp the whole brand, want to make people feel comfortable, do internal communication, do also, recruitment part and even the culture part. Is it that employer branding entails all these topics, or is it that it changed over time and it evolved from actually part of recruitment to something?
I think for the first moment we must take care of our employees. After the few months, something like that, we need to go like normal stuff, because it's real life now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anything to add here before we move on to the next question?
I think, to be honest, as I mentioned, I'm absolutely on this stability, side. How Nate and Merchan and Delia also mentioned already, but I think, it also depends on which sector you are basically working. Before, at least in Germany, I saw, for example, in retail, like, on these supermarkets, people were like really using this, crisis as an opportunity. How basically, supermarkets were using this to change attributions. How, cashiers were, for example, seen. So normally, everyone would think, okay, these are low-level employees, and also, companies don't really care about them. And now they are like our heroes because, they serve us with food because we can buy the food in the supermarket. So I think this is also like an opportunity, and also to position yourself as an employer, that you're caring for your employees. I read, for example, in Germany, they are getting like bonus payments. They are now like the heroes, and so many like retailers are using it already in their advertisement. So I think it really sometimes also depends on the sector. If this is like, for example, an opportunity, for doing like smart change communication, basically.
Yeah, that also fits into employer branding in that sense, and change communication. Yeah, I think sort of some all said is really that this putting people forward is super important. It was already important, but it even is more relevant now, to comfort themselves, to comfort any stakeholders that they interact with your brand as well. Okay, great. Let me move on to the next question as well. And this goes actually a bit in the recruiting part of employer branding, Nate, that you mentioned as one part of employer branding, but definitely not like the full employer branding picture. But is there anything that companies can do to provide a stellar online candidate experience in this time, when content and remote communication is more important than ever?
I can start now. So for me, even more communication, because it's perfect time to focus on online activities, because everyone now in online, looking for some information about open position, which company is still working. So in my company, I just start something like HR shifts. Is like our recruitment have 1 hour per week, where they answer all questions related the recruitment process, about working in our company. So everyone wants to have some information about our company, about our staffs, can text in Messenger. We also put for the mayor our employees in social media, because for me our employee is the perfect now ambassador. Something they are real, and they are still working. They have new reality like home office, but they are still with us, and this is the perfect moment to show our culture, show our values during the online activities.
Yeah, agree. Cool. Who wants to follow on that?
Yeah.
Nick, I can go.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just going to give a practical example, like what we're doing at Blinkist, and I'm sorry that I'm outside, that you see a lot of motorcycles maybe. So obviously this was a big question for us as well at Blinkist. Like, what do we do? Do we even like continue hiring or not hiring? And I do agree with the point of communication, and not like an email communication. So now we're testing something, and we started this week, and it's going to go for 2 more weeks, and then we're going to see whether it's effective or not. But now we're trying to also have phone calls with the candidates before their interviews from the TA. It's not about an interview, but it's really like, how was it? How was your experience so far? Do you need anything from us to accommodate with you? Any wishes, any requests, and also preparing them for the next interview that they have. So because I think a lot of companies, what they're doing, and we also did, okay, we can now do remote interviews, but it doesn't work that way. Your offline interview that's happening in the office is completely different than the remote one. So I think here you have to invest more time towards the candidates to make sure that they are making the right decision for themselves. And to be able to do that, we decided that this is the easiest way to not send them an email, but like actually call them and like have a normal chat, which also shows that they're valued. So if some people want to learn more about this, I can also have chat afterwards, but this is something that we try at this specific time.
Nice example, yeah. And Nate, do you get that request from your clients as well to be involved in this part of the business?
No, not directly, but it is something that we do just as like a value-added like audit before we kick off projects, because it's really, I love the idea of feedback, and I'm really big on objective like UX research that is going to like surface the truth, right? It's easy, like we can put on like our blinders and live in our little world and go like, oh, like our process is just how whoever says it should be. But unless like we get some outside perspective on the good and the bad, it's really hard to determine where we're succeeding and where we're missing. And so a lot of times like we'll come in and we'll just like audit a candidate experience and show gaps and like where people are missing on this stuff. But so feedback is, in my opinion, is really, really important. But also to like, just to piggyback on communication is extremely important always. I think now it's like mandatory. Where there's two places that companies sit right now. One is they're paused. They're not hiring. They're playing it conservative. They're just kind of like waiting this thing out. And then there's still companies who are thriving and still hiring. Like I've talked to companies who are still hiring at scale, and like it's almost like things haven't changed because they're just in industries that have been isolated or insulated rather, and are kind of thriving, right? And those are like two different categories. And I think if you're in a position like the majority of companies where maybe hiring has either slowed or it's paused, now's the time to like step back and really, really look at processes, because when this thing is over, and it is going to end, the doors are going to open back up. And if your processes aren't true and in place and doing all the things that you hope that they will do, that's going to be a big opportunity missed. Now, companies who are still hiring at scale, I think really doubling down on like feedback and talking to candidates and treating them well and surprise and delight, like things that you wouldn't normally do, because like it's just a different world now, right? And those types of things matter. And I think like there's ways to leverage content to do that, and there's ways to leverage humans. And if you can find the blend between the two, but I think like having very tactical pieces of content that are going to like tell a story and manage expectations and make a candidate feel safe and secure and informed throughout their process, that will do a lot in guiding them in the right direction.
Yeah, great points. I totally agree with that as well. Finding this blend. And Marian, do you want?
I want to add something, because I don't know, I believe like in an ideal world, of course, all these initiatives probably should already, be set up when we weren't in this, Corona situation. And I think this is probably like really the task also of like a recruitment department to make sure, that you get like proper feedback, that you probably like call and not write an email. And I'm like, sometimes, to be honest, like quite surprised when I'm like talking with companies how messed up sometimes processes are still. But I think for employer branding now, we have to think how we basically can convert maybe the candidate in a smart way. And I think there's this concept of moments that you remember, or moments that matter, or I think there's one concept which is called like brand love, and there's like a stage where they said, okay, meet memorable. And I think this is something which is of course like easier when you can still meet face to face. And I think this is something where employer branding really comes into play now, to create these moments that matter. And I think sometimes it can be like really small initiatives. So if you're having a candidate which is like in a stage, in a later stage, which you really want to convert, what about like I mean, maybe it sounds cheesy, but writing them like a personal letter from the hiring manager or the person where he or she will report to. Or if you are a company who's producing something nice, why don't you send him like a small present or small voucher code if it's like possible in the country you're hiring. I think these are like the small initiatives which maybe now make a real difference, because we are all kind of locked up at home and, getting tired sometimes of not socializing or whatever. And then when you get something, which maybe warms up your heart, you will more remember this company than any other company where you're in the process at.
Yeah, great. I think those are great initiatives as well. And then I want to ask a question again, how much of that is employer branding, right? And how much of that is like a recruiting strategy, for instance?
Sure.
Well? Is there a divide? Cool. Let me move on to the next question, to be wary of time here. And I want to also leave some room for Q&A of the audience. So make sure to post your questions in the right box. I think this question we actually answered already. So how did it impact your companies or your clients' employer branding strategy? I think we touched on a few points there. So I wanted to skip to this question then. Have you learned anything new about employer branding that you didn't know before as a result of this COVID-19?
I can go first. Why don't I go? We all sit there kind of, who's going to do it? I think it's confirmed things. I don't want to say, I think things are changing all the time. And so I'm quick to not assume what employer branding is going to actually become. Like we're still in something, like we haven't gotten out of it. But there's one thing that it's absolutely confirming for me, like I mentioned earlier, is that the real magic of great employer branding is what it can do internally at a company. And it's amazing. It really is amazing. And I don't think that's like an overstatement. It's when something, an initiative, a piece of content, whatever it might be, can unite people and rally them around a common cause, an ethos, a new vision for the organization, around their peers, like that's really, really special. And that's what I'm seeing happening a lot right now. And that's just like, it's super inspiring for me. And as a result of that, like if we look at the direction that corporate marketing is going, hopefully smart marketers are realizing that humanness really matters, and that people want to see human stories, and they want to see like the people behind an organization. That's what employer branding has been fighting for all along. And so I think like my hope is that employer branding is now going to get, like, I hate to use the cliche, the seat at the table, but like move in this direction where corporate branding is like, oh yes, like that's what they were talking about. And there can be this like unified, unified, I don't know, like initiative where it's like, we're going to partner together to tell really human stories. And yes, our markets might be different, but there's a lot of crossover, and we're actually partners instead of just like working in silos. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I like it. And I think with this webinar, we're already trying to push employer branding, right, and get the seat at the table, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can I add there? I really love your point, Nate, and I absolutely agree with you that I think it's a high time that, employer branding really gets like a strategic seat at the table and it's not the little sister of consumer branding. But I think I want to be like very humble, and when I just reflect about myself, I think what I learned during this Corona times now is that how often, we are, or at least me, or I am creating, employer branding or feeling of community or feeling of togetherness or, connectiveness through also like offline initiatives, like meetups or stories from the office, which of course now are all eliminated because the majority of us is working now remotely from home. And I think through this, the importance of, for example, like ambassadors or brand ambassadors, you name it, within the company, within different seniorities, within different departments, becomes really important and crucial, because they actually know how to, you know, communicate with their peers, or they know how to reach their peers in which online forums or in which online platforms, basically. So I think it's very important to plan strategically or global, but then really, you know, act local with different brand ambassadors in different key talent markets, because they also know, you know, how to reach these talents from home, because they are like connected with them and not us basically as employer branding managers. So I think this is something which came up in my mind, that these, you know, local approaches are like really important, and yeah, can still save your ass basically when you're not, you know, create amazing offline experiences.
Yeah, great. I love it. I think that is a shift that we see as a result in COVID-19 in the world currently, shifting from this global to local, and putting the importance on that, right? So definitely employer branding. Imran, you want to share your learning as well from this time?
Yeah, I don't know what it's a learning, but again, something that we tested. What we focused on, like there was like product, and it's always a product, and then you have the employer, and it's the employer. And even if we had mixed content and reach to people, we realized that actually now we can combine these two. And I think Blinkist really has the platform to do that. So now we, for example, have a Blinkist original series that you can find on the app that is called Checking In. And it's like we're checking in with our own employees, sharing their own experiences, so other people can also hear, which is an employer branding, but really much embedded in the product itself. So it's actually a product feature. So I think with COVID, we really came up with great ideas, learn new things that we can actually tailor even the product itself for different, I don't know, target groups.
And isn't it also for free right now? I think I have Blinkist on my mobile. It's for free right now.
Yeah, it's for free. Yeah.
Go and
I like the example, American.
Go and get a Blinkist.
Cool. And then Jana, you what is your learning?
Yeah, I just have a small. Actually, the employer branding, which I learn now, is not starting here now and here. Yeah, employer branding is bidding for the year, for the month, and this situation perfectly show us all this situation profitability to paying grades by the employees. This situation show what our current employer is. Is he interested by his employees? Does he have a plan B? Does he have a support plan? The other hand, this situation ideally shows which company employ employees. When the company announced that is ordered to survive and maintain opposition, it must be introduced a pay cut for everyone. Wherever this situation will have employees or everyone will be stay or leave. So this situation learned me employer branding is about the business, and the employee as well. If we have a good employer branding, internal and external, everything will be smooth and easy. So we can start employer branding now, but it's not the same when we have the strategy after 5 or 3 years.
Being in there for the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Then I want to actually leave COVID-19 topic behind for now. It will certainly come back in the Q&A. But there are some attendees also that don't have that are coming from smaller startups, but that don't dive too deep into employer branding initiatives. So I wanted to ask you, where do you start when you want to set up your employer branding? Oh, sorry, Marian. Yeah, please go.
Me? Okay. I always, of course, it really depends on which reality you're working, if you're working in a corporate or in a startup. So I'm more taking now the startup stance here. So I would always advise just go for it, but define what's your key objective, because I think some companies are, aiming more for brand awareness. Some companies are aiming maybe to get more candidates in the pipeline. So I think it's really important to define for yourself what's your key objective. Because if you think you want to create like brand awareness, but your manager thinks, okay, we are getting 1,000 more, talents the next week in the pipeline, then maybe, it won't work out in the end. And then I think it's really important to really define what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So, for example, if you say, okay, employer branding for us is to get more talents in the pipeline, what you're going to do, maybe then you focus first on like some performance marketing actions and how you're going to do it, while you try different kind of ads. So I would, really like channel it down. What's your key objective? And then take the different initiatives to have it a bit more strategic and, a bit more narrowed down, because employer branding, as we also, discover in this webinar already, is such a big topic, and so many people have different opinion what actually employer branding is. So I think it's really important to first define the key objective, what you want to basically achieve with employer branding. And I think it's also my own experience, which I had in the past, that this is maybe most important before you go for it and before you jump into something. And then you have like different expectations and it won't work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Set goals first. And Nate, how does that go for you, kicking off with a client that doesn't have any employer branding initiatives yet?
Yeah. So I think just in general, an employer brand exists regardless of what anybody does. It's already there, just like a corporate brand, just like anything. There is a perception of a company as an employer. Employer branding, I think, is an attempt to start controlling that perception. Most of it exists out of our control, right? But employer branding is like actually like being intentional about directing that conversation and maybe telling another story. But like what we see, like most companies don't put a lot of effort behind this stuff, and they just kind of leave it out there, and they're very surprised to see what out there actually means. And so, but besides that, I think like if we're looking even at the current times, but any time, defining who you are as an organization is extremely important. Like to me, that's like the foundational starting point of everything. So it's like, who are we as an organization? Now today, that probably has changed since COVID has hit. And so I think like now is a great time to revisit your why, your values, whatever. But if you're just starting from scratch, it's like, who are we? And the way to know who you are is like, not just to get that from the founders, it's to like actually get it from the people who are living in this world day to day. And so I think like focus groups, which I've been a part of a lot of virtual focus groups lately, with diverse sets of employees from many different functions, asking them very pointed questions that are just about like, why did you join the company? What is unique? What is special? What is a moment that would define your time at this company? Like extracting those like the emotional connection between employee and culture and company. And then from there, then from there it's marketing, right? It's like thinking about like, okay, how do we tell these stories both internally and externally and put them in digestible formats that are going to appeal to wherever our candidates live online, and how are we going to like get that in front of them? From there, it's just like, it's content marketing, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it starts with like this foundation of like, who are we?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And American, did you feel that when you joined Blinkist, it was also where you started?
Yes. I think when I remember my very first time, it was just like I started with like, okay, I'm gonna take some photos, and that's how I'm gonna start, and that's how it started. And it was the wrong thing to do back then for me. But I think one important thing that I really value, and I find it as a very beginning stage, is talking to the employees. Some of them, we have to accept the fact that some of them don't know employer branding. Some of them are not really grasping the importance of it. And that's completely fair because they've never faced with it. They've never educated themselves on that. So I do believe it's also our responsibility to tell them, hey, this is also working for you. If we have a good employer, they're going to think that we have a good product. If we have a good product, they're going to think we have a good employer. So really bringing everyone on this ship and saying that I'm going to use you as a content, and I want you to be you're my biggest and most valuable content. There's an ambulance passing by. I'm so but yeah, this was I'm living on a very busy street. But yeah, I think this was, for me, the biggest step and the most important step. Because if you don't have the space, if you don't have people who really grasp the importance of employer branding and really ready to share their own experiences, knowledge, whatever they have with you, it might not work really authentically.
Yeah. Can I just add something there? Because I just wanted to jump on what Nate said earlier, because earlier we were like talking about, breaking silos basically. And I think already during this brand discovery phase where you do like focus groups or you do like interviews or you name it, it's like a great opportunity actually to team up with a consumer branding team if it exists in your organization, because, they are doing it all day long. They are doing like interviews or like brand discoveries all day long to adjust the product brands or corporate brands. So I think it's like really smart to team up with them, because in the end of the day, they also kind of need to support what you want to communicate, right? So I would also always advise to breaking these silos as soon as possible.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. And Diana, you at TenCloud, was it also building it from scratch when you joined?
Yeah. We have, for me, actually, the employer branding in TenCloud is very close with the business, and that's why when I start my planning some structure about the employer branding, we cooperate with the business. We always ask for the first thing to define the target, who we want to reach and why. We choose together with the business the communication channels, the set goals. So that's why the employer branding in TenCloud is very close with the HR, but with the business as well, with the marketing. In our company, the employer branding is not like internal and external, but it's together. That's why our people, our employees, is very important for us, because they are the best ambassador of our employer branding staffs. So for the first thing to be the best employer branding is have the good relation with your employees, and all these staffs will be done.
Yeah, I think this even also answers the next question that we had. Well, where do you start when you don't have a budget, right? And I think what you all say is that, yeah, again, putting these people forward and collecting the stories there is a good beginning, and then you make it more serious over time as well. Yeah, cool. I wanna we're with time and switch to the Q&A of the audience, because I saw some great questions popping up as well. So I want to kick off with Chia's question, and it's a tough one to start with, I would say, but it is definitely relating to the COVID-19 crisis currently. So the question is, for those companies that had to cut costs and lay off their employees or put them on government scheme due to COVID, how can they minimize the damage to their talent brands? Nate, you want to take this one?
That's a really good question, actually. Yeah, I think if we come back to like authenticity and transparency, I'm very careful just personally to not judge decisions that have to be made, but I do judge or have opinions about behaviors behind those decisions or after those decisions. And I think like when stuff happens, as unfortunate as it is, sometimes jobs are lost and sometimes companies have to make cuts. And I can't put myself in the position of a founder who answers to a board and has to make those types of decisions. That's just like out of my world. I can't even relate to it. But the behavior behind that and the way that they approach it and there's a lot to be said. And I think that tells the real story about the value of people. And I think companies who could get out in front of it, be transparent about like, this is what happened. Here's how we handled it. Here's what we're doing to help transition our employees to new opportunities. Here's the type of pay we've continued to give them, whatever it might be. But like, you have to own the situation. You can't you can't not own the situation. But I think like by doing that, it creates this like humanness that people go like, oh, I get it. Like that's a person who is like making a tough decision, but they treated it with a ton of empathy and compassion. And, you know, like you could have like, I don't know, a lot more understanding.
Yeah. Showing your empathy. Yeah. Yeah, and Artken, how is this? Does it relate to Blinkist in any way? And would you have a tip here for people or companies dealing with the situation?
I think I am in a very lucky place because I really like the fact that my founder also had to obviously talk with us about this, and it was a rather positive one, but it was honest at least. And I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of companies does is like really giving promises that they cannot keep, and also making assumptions about future, which no one knows. So I can only double back Nate, being honest, transparent, especially in this matter. Like this is a matter that like people, we're not talking about like a simple thing. This is like a livelihood. You know, some people have families and all these things. So I think setting the right expectation is very important. And to me, for this one, I really I would like companies to focus on more internal than the external. Like cut your hiring if you cannot keep people, but like really make smart decisions that is again tailored to your employees, and be honest. If this is a business, you know, sometimes businesses don't survive. Sometimes you have to make these very horrible decisions, but it doesn't mean that you have to sugarcoat things, lie to your own employees and to outside. You have to be, I think, build a and we're very lucky. We're living in Germany, you know, there are like even places that it's worse. Like here you can get like really good benefits. But I think being honest and like really having an eye-to-eye connection is key.
Yeah, I think actually what both you and Nate are saying is really nicely summed up by Zoe in the comment section, saying that you can always decide how you're going to react to candidates. So be empathetic, be transparent, and be credible. I think that sums it up quite nice. Yeah, thank you, Zoe, for answering it. And Marian, do you have anything to add here?
No, I would also absolutely agree with Nate and Merchan saying that you need to communicate open, authentic, and not sugarcoat anything, and be transparent and credible. Because I mean, everyone will have an understanding for this, because we all know that right now this pandemic is happening. So I don't have anything to add, basically.
No, I think it's said. And then Diana, for you?
Yeah, I think guys says all these steps. What can we do? We can maybe say not goodbye forever, but this situation is not like normal situation for everyone. We can say emphatically and open, but you know, it's not depend on us. So it's not normal situation. It's not easy.
Yeah, and then people on the other side of your brand should be aware of that as well. I agree. Cool. And then a question from Mark actually, and I think Diana is a good one because you already touched upon the topic here. I will put it in the screen. Isn't this the perfect time to divorce employer branding from recruiting even further? So how are you taking the steps to speak into general talent management strategy, internal communications, employee satisfaction, etc.? And how do you practically look beyond talent acquisition? And I think you already gave a small intro on 10Clouds doing that, employer branding sitting in every department and not only in HR.
Yeah, that's why I say we are working with all the department, and we the employee branding is in HR department and marketing as well. So when we have some problem with the recruitment styles, we can do more marketing styles and something like that. So that's why it is the best way to incorporate it inside the 10Clouds. Because now in 10Clouds we have like only 2 open position to recruitment. So this kind of employee branding is not to do all those tasks. So now I cooperate with the marketing, with social media specialist. So yep.
Yeah. Cool. That's a nice cross-functional collaboration that you have there. And Nate, you touched upon it in the beginning as well, right? That it goes so much more into culture, for instance. So what would you advise somebody that wants to divorce employer branding from recruiting even further?
Yeah, I think it depends on, I think, the size of the company and where the company's at right now, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's easier to pull off when maybe things are paused or slowed down on the recruiting front. I talked to an employer brand leader at like a 250-person startup last week who now, like, they've paused hiring, and so she's partnering with marketing to create types of content that can like blend both worlds, right? But I think like going back to like leveraging employees and recruiting employees right now to be part of this process is extremely important. And again, like I mentioned this at the beginning, but like employer brand touches two markets. One is an external market and one is an internal. That internal one has always carried so much weight, but now even more so because of the demand on the external market is probably less for many companies. And so I'm seeing like really creative people coming up with ideas that maybe have been sitting on the shelf, for a while. And it's like this whole concept of like, it's not what we do, it's how we do things. And there's companies do some really cool, unique things and nobody knows about it. Mm-hmm. They might have like really cool processes. They might have like amazing happy hours. They might be doing, I don't know. There's just like so many things that companies do to set themselves apart. And I think like now is the time to like tell those stories, but then also test it on your internal market. Because they're the voices of the company. And mm-hmm. so that's like where the direction I think things could be headed. It's more of this, like, I don't want to say it's like internal comms, because internal comms is like a different thing, but it's very much like internal communications around culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. And Merken, is it because you're talent acquisition specialist, right, focusing on employer branding? How is it in Blinkist? Is it also sort of blended in with the other functions?
Yes, I mean, we also Blinkist work more holocratic setting. So we do have actually circles, and circles like really intertwined. Mm-hmm. I do work with the design team. I do work with, and now my partner is just coming in home. I'm the loudest speaker. So I work with the marketing team, the BI team, the data science team, and like everything very much works closely together. And I think the way that we also shift now is like really, I'm doing very minimal recruitment, to be very honest. But my main task is like to make sure that the company communicates within each other, and not make it like a very serious way, but in a very informal way, and also bringing the product as well in it. So working with the product teams, also like, bringing a product future that is very much related to your employees. I think this is a good level that you can go.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Blinkist is doing that well. And Marian, you saw many different environments, right? Was employer branding always part of recruiting, or is it already the other department?
Oh wow, I think it was. I think it's like really different, and I think there's not one solution fits it all, of course. And I don't even actually know if you should divorce it so much from recruiting. I think it doesn't probably matter in the end where it's situated. It's more matter how well you basically work with the different departments, because employer branding is such a such a department or position where you need to negotiate and talk to so many different stakeholders, and it depends so much what's basically your key objective. So maybe if your key objective is more focusing on retention, so you do more like internal stuff, then probably you work closely together with internal comms or HR. But if you're more in a hypergrowth phase and retention is not the number one thing, but you need to acquire a lot of talents very fast, then probably you work more closely with recruiting. So I don't think probably it's always necessary to make like very strict lines between the different departments. Because in the end of the day, you know, you need to work with so many departments like marketing, brand, talent acquisition, HR. I mean, you even need to communicate with the engineers to, you know, get like content or have a good relations with them, or office management. I always promote, you know, have a good relationship to office management because they know everything what's going on in the company. So it's also good for employer branding. So I think you have to be like a social butterfly and everywhere. So I think you could also be just a one-man department as long as you are good to, you know, work with the others together.
Yeah. So you say that
just
doesn't matter.
Oh.
Sorry, Nate, please.
No, I want to like big +1 to like everything that was just said. I mean, that's like that's a very astute observation, and I agree. Like, I don't think it's about removing it from removing employer brand or separating it from recruiting. I think it just depends on like where the needs fall. It's that would be kind of like separating marketing from sales. You know, I mean, you're not going to do that, but the needs of marketing change, the messaging changes, the audience changes, you know, like stuff like that. And that's like kind of the same with employer branding. But I think at startups, like the reality is like when things are on and you're hiring at scale, like you're supporting that function.
Yeah. Absolutely. Even though I sometimes think, and again, I think it really depends on which reality you work. If you work in a corporate or in a startup, in a scale up, in which country you probably work. But I think probably sometimes, you know, in brand departments, there is more money than in an HR department. So maybe it's sometimes smarter to, you know, be in a brand department so you can do more stuff when being in an HR department. And I think also you need to have in mind where are your probably like sponsors, so people who believe in employer branding and who believe in what you're doing. So of course it's, you know, it's smarter to team up with them. So I think there's really not, you know, a solution which fits all the companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it depends on your companies and where the money and the needs are on where employer branding lies. On the other hand, that might be difficult for founders or so to really structure the company to see where do we fit on employer branding and what are the goals of this team, right? So I think that is something we need to explore beyond this webinar on saying like what is employer branding. It's a question. Cool. Nate, there's one question specifically for you as well, and I think it's also a bit on how Job Portraits is operating. But you mentioned gathering data from interviews. What kind of data are you gathering, and what kind of questions are you asking candidates? I think it's related to the focus group that you mentioned. And Leslie, has Job Portraits specific KPIs connected to this data to make sense of it and to improve also by making decisions based on this data?
I'll answer that last question right away. No. I'll tell you, but that's because like we specifically do like the content creation, and we partner with internal talent teams to create the content, and then they're the ones responsible for executing on it. That's a direction we want to move in, but it's another knowledge set. And so like, I'm happy to like say that the answer is no right now with that. But, as far as like data points, there's a company for one, when we do like strategic projects with organizations, we use an external company called User Interviews. They're in the United States. I don't know how that translates over internationally, but, they have a large set of candidates who are on the market, all different roles where, you can bring those candidates in to give like very objective feedback on like different parts of a process or on an employer brand. And so we leverage them a lot for external interviews. On the internal side, what we do is like conduct many rounds of focus groups to ask a variety of questions all around like, what is the current state of the company? How do you feel about it? What makes it special? Like, what is just super unique about this organization? And also too, like, what are the challenges that you face? Because I think like it's very important to talk about both sides of it. And that's what like really differentiates, to use that word again, is like when you can tell the story of like, this is the good, but these are also the challenges, you're going to like attract and repel the right type of candidate. And so I'm happy to share. I can send you. I have like a whole list of questions that we know candidates ask from doing just tons of research with the market. I'm happy to send you that scorecard as like a value add. I think it has like 9 or 10 questions that like we know that engineers and like pretty high level salespeople just like want to know when you're looking at a company.
Cool. So Anke, please reach out to Nate after the webinar as well to get the question list. And we will also be sharing a summary and all resources that are mentioned here. Cool. Thank you so much, Nate. I know we're running over time already. So I saw one fun closing question. And if you have any creative or crazy ideas on what we do after this whole COVID-19 crisis is over, or the lockdown is over at least, is there something you want to do on the first day that you're back, that you're out again in terms of employer branding? Marianne.
Well, as I mentioned, I think in the very beginning of the webinar, it's now a great, a situation to basically collect like input how you can change your company into like more like a remotely company. And I think you can gather right now so many ideas from your own employees, and also gather ideas for employer branding of this new remote workplace. So I think this is what I would probably already start right now, and then we discuss maybe in focus groups after the lockdown. I think this is something cool.
Nice, I like it. You, Nate?
This is a tough question. I think, gosh, I'm not really sure. I think like, honestly, like, and this is the truth. I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm just really trying to stay on top of like what's happening in the industry and how people are feeling, and how like leaders like that are on this call are managing the situation, because I said this earlier, but I've just been very careful not to try to predict what and where employer branding is going. So I just like continually have like tons of calls with people who are in the seat to just find out like what they're dealing with. And, I have aspirations for the industry, and that is to like move in a much more creative direction where employer brand leaders have the freedom that their marketing and corporate branding colleagues have. And I think luckily this crisis has kind of opened those doors, and like opened up like the box that employer branding has always been in. It's like, you have to be this, and now you can be whatever you want. So I definitely have aspirations, but as far as predictions and things go, I'm like really trying to like, play it cool on that one.
Yeah, cool. Any last comment to add there, Markan or Diana?
I can add maybe. I think it is like very well said. But one thing that I would like to do is maybe on the opposite. I would try to stay a little bit humble, because I think a lot of people hurt. Like this really created damage, and I think it's not like, oh, it's over, let's go and celebrate, but it's also, I think we still have to keep it humble, simple, and respectful. I think that's something that I would definitely keep in mind to do.
Yeah, nice. Diana?
It's a question, so I don't know honestly yet, but my company is thinking about being 100% remote. So for sure we will meet together with the integration and talk, face to face. So that will be for the first thing after the lockdown, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. I think it's an opportunity to definitely come out stronger, right, with a lot of the learnings that are shared in this webinar as well. And I actually wanna close down as well. We're running a bit over time already. So thank you so much, Diana, American, Nate, and Marian for devoting time to speak and to answer all the questions that we stated, but also that the audience stated. And thank you so much for all attendees to join today. I hope that everyone leaves this webinar with some more wisdom on how to communicate effectively with your employer branding during these times. And feel free to reach out in case if you have any follow-up questions. I'm sure the speakers will be happy to answer them Tomorrow morning, we're going to share a summary with the highlights of the events and also the video recordings of all talking points as well. And then I just want to say, thanks again to the speakers, and please all stay healthy to the attendees as well, and hope to see you again on the webinar.
Thank you.